In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the face of the deep, or over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Now if we turn to Revelation 19:13, I can read it if you don't want to turn there. You can check it out later if you like. All the scriptures too are printed in the bulletin, so if you ever want to look them back up when you get home, you can. Revelations 19:13, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And they're talking about Jesus. His name is actually called the Word of God. Jesus is called the Word of God. And the reason I'm telling you this, we'll get to. I want to prove a point. The Word of God is Jesus, and Jesus has been with God right from the very beginning in Genesis. He's also with God in the very end. He's listed in the very beginning of Genesis, and he's also listed in the end as the Word of God in Revelations. So Jesus has always been with God in the beginning, and he always will be with God. So the reason I'm telling you this is I don't want you to think that when Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary, that's the first time he ever appeared to anyone, or it's the first knowledge that we have of him, because he's always been. In John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, and you can parallel this with Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now we just read in Revelations where Jesus is called the Word. And then again he's called the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You know, we hear about the Trinity, and sometimes it confuses us. But Jesus and God are inseparable. Jesus said, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father." He was in the beginning with God, and he also was God. There's no distinction between the two of them. You can't separate the two of them. The same as you can't separate somebody whose son is just like him and he acts just like him. You know, the similarities are inseparable. And if you've hurt the Father, you've hurt the Son. And if you hurt that Son, you surely hurt his Father. You can't separate Jesus from his Father, nor the Father from Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Verse 3, John 1:3. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In other words, God did not create anything without Jesus being right there and being a part of it. Verse 4, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Now there's no reference to Genesis where God says to Jesus, you know, to where we can say, yeah, there he is. But this is something to consider. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image. Who is God talking to? I'll read it again. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So it's very important to understand that Jesus was with God and Jesus was God. And the reason that it's so important that we understand this is that when Jesus came down to be born a human being, it was a great step. It was a great leap. It was a great jump. So not only did Jesus, the man, be sacrificed on the cross for us, but Jesus, who was God, allowed himself to be put on the cross for us. Allowed himself to be born as a man and to go through everything that we ever suffer through. And then allowed himself to be sacrificed. God himself came down and sacrificed himself for our lives. That's how important we are to him. That's how much we mean to him. Luke chapter 1, verses 5 through 6. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias, of the course of Abia, and his wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless. So no one could have pointed a finger at this couple and said, they've done wrong here. They haven't obeyed you, Lord. They were blameless before God. There was no accusation before them, before God. We've studied in John chapter 4, 23 and 24 that God is looking for worshipers who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. He's looking for people who will love Him and obey Him and worship Him, who will walk in truth, who won't walk in deceit. And basically, when I think of Zacharias and Elizabeth, they were those kind of people. They walked before God and they were obedient to Him, and their main desire was to obey Him. Luke chapter 1, verse 7 through 17. And they had no child. Who else do we remember had a really hard time having a child in the Old Testament? We studied it before. Abraham's wife Sarah, right? You're going to see some similarities between Elizabeth and Sarah that are really pretty unique. Luke chapter 1, verses 7 through 17. And they had no child because that Elizabeth was barren, and they both were now well stricken in years. They were both very old. And it's the same with Sarah and Abraham. They both wanted to have a child. They were promised a child, the chosen child, and they waited a long time. And when they were both too old, really, to have children, God gave them a child. And this is similar here. I'm going to read it again. And they had no child because that Elizabeth was barren, and they were both now well stricken in years. And it came to pass that while he executed the priest office before God in the order of his course, according to the custom of the priest office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. And the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense. And there appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. That would wake you up, wouldn't it?